Coming up, a conversation with Glenn Carlson, candidate for an at-large seat on Colorado Springs City Council.
This is 6035 Media.
Casting an informed vote is your right and your duty as a citizen. I'm Brian Grossman, Executive Editor of 6035.
And I'm Shelley Roars, spokesperson for the League of Women Voters of the Pikes Peak Region.
We're teaming up to bring you conversations with the candidates in the April 2023 Colorado Springs city election. So this interview is both an episode of the new 6035 Vote podcast
and the League's Making Democracy Work podcast. So let's get to it. We're going to start with opening remarks from Glenn Carlson, an at-large city council candidate. Go ahead, Glenn.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, guys. As mentioned, my name is Glenn Carlson. I was born and raised here down south. Actually grew up in Widefield, where most of my family actually still lives. Like I said, born and raised here, and went to school at Mesa Ridge. And then on the last day of the application was due to my mom begging me, I applied to Colorado College, got accepted, got a full ride scholarship, and eventually got an economics degree from Colorado College. After that, I got a job in Denver, working for actually Colorado's largest company, Aero Electronics, managing a several $100 million portfolio of global business. And so that was just an incredible experience, aside from the commute. And about that, kind of towards the end of that, my wife and I had started our own business as well. We have a massage therapy business, and this is our 10th year in business, actually. And so we've got 2 locations, about 35 employees now. We're still trying to hire as quickly as possible. And so I guess that would be a snapshot of maybe my early life, education, career, among other things. Colorado Springs is obviously home. I've been lucky enough to travel to a lot of great places for work, and so I've gotten to experience a lot of great places, and I've had opportunities to leave, and I've never pulled the trigger. And the more I thought about it, the more it just really cemented the fact that I love Colorado Springs. This is home for me. Everything that I'm passionate about, that I do, is right in our backyard, so we're incredibly lucky. And so, this is home. I volunteered here, very active in parks, trails, open space efforts, very active in the local business community, helping fellow entrepreneurs, just generally just staying active in the communities for as long as I possibly can.
Okay. Glenn, let's get to some specific questions. Let's start with water and development. This was just decided yesterday by City Council. What's your stand on the 128% water rule for extending water and other utilities to flagpole annexed developments?
Yeah, great question. Especially, the last couple of years we've seen just an explosion of development all over the city. And so I think it's on everybody's radar. Water is also on everybody's radar. We're kind of wondering, where is it coming from, right? Where are we going to get the water to supply Colorado Springs? And that's a great question. On the surface, I think a lot of people think the 130% ordinance was kind of random and kind of brought out of thin air, but it actually was not. There is data to support the acre feet of water that we get currently, what adding new communities would do and how it would impact that water that we currently are allocated, and the buffer in between that, which if we were to annex this new area down to the southeast, puts us dangerously close to the buffer, as I understand it, and not really a favorable position. And yes, in the lower part of the basin, we do have water rights. We've worked on that for decades. Mm-hmm. As most of you guys may know, it's wildly complicated. But the upper part of the basin, where we're really seeing the trouble, Lake Powell, Lake Mead, the federal government could curtail that flow at any time if it needed to, especially since they're struggling to generate power now because the water levels are so low. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, where the water comes from is wildly important. I think kind of a byproduct and something that I focused on or would like to focus on is the water that we currently get and how much we actually waste. I think that's a good question that we need to start asking as well. And, maybe we need to tailor some of our guidelines and, watering restrictions and things like that to really watch what we waste.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So kind of an offshoot of that question regarding water, it is one of our biggest issues in our community. I guess I'm going to twofold it, right? With regards to waste, you mentioned the waste. That to me is kind of how do you go about dealing with waste, number one, and should the city consider extending water and or other utilities to subdivisions located outside the city that might never be annexed as part of being a regional water provider?
Yeah, so the first part of your question regards to the waste, I'm generally just not a fan of wasting anything, whether it's energy, water, money, take your pick. So it's something I focus on. I was lucky enough to do a really good tour with Colorado Springs Utilities a couple years ago, and it was very eye-opening. And oddly enough, 78% of our water goes to landscaping, which is mind-boggling. And most of our water comes from over 100 miles away. And so I think that in and of itself is kind of fascinating, but I don't think a lot of people know that. And so better guidelines and better code as to median size and what we can put in medians and how much water we can allocate to stuff like that. I think there's lots of little bites of the pie that we can take before we try to boil the ocean, so to speak. And that's a really poor water pun, but I think there's lots of little things that we can do. And generally what we've seen, growing up here, I'm starting to see the trend of people that are starting to xeriscape too. Not because they were forced or not because it was a fad, but having a big green yard, although great, is expensive and a waste of water. And so while I'm not going to tell anybody not to have a nice yard, I think a lot of people are coming to that realization on their own. And so I'm not sure if that answers your question fully, Shelley, but I think there's a lot of little things we can look at. And it's going to be detail-oriented work, no doubt about it.
The second part of that of providing water. Oh, yep.
Yeah, so the second part, if you look, thanks, Dave. If you look at the map of that requested annexation in the southeast, not only is it not contiguous to the city's current boundaries, but it's really not even close. And so, in my mind, there's legal stuff behind this, and we all know that. But in my mind, in the, what I call the progression of a city, it's a term I like to use, to kind of help me understand things. I'm just not sure it makes sense. And that development could get water from fountain, as I understand it, but don't really want to do it for various reasons. And regardless of whether or not I agree with those reasons, I just don't think developments like that, kind of fit what we're after. And it's really not just even water too. The police, and you have to think about fire. And then the economics behind it, from my research, don't seem to make a ton of sense just yet. And so, if we're talking about anywhere between $160 to $200 million of infrastructure to take water out to that community, I'm just not sure the math even makes sense in either direction for the city or the developer. And so, we do need to work regionally. We know that water rights are wildly complicated. And so if you don't have the water, you're kind of screwed.
Yeah.
And so you better stay in front of it and make sure you're planning and doing it correctly in the first place.
I think that's back to me. So we'll change course a little bit. Where do you stand on accessory dwelling units being allowed in single-family residential areas?
So I'm generally in favor of the personal property rights, and if somebody wants to have a small dwelling, in their backyard, I'm not opposed to it. Where I do think it can get a little reckless is if it starts to destroy or eat away at the integrity of a neighborhood. And something you guys will hear from me a lot is neighborhood and communities. they are ultra important. They make up the identity of a city, right? And so if ADUs were to get out of control and all of a sudden you've got cars coming and going, and I think Manitou sees this quite a bit, then all of a sudden it's a problem that you may have not foreseen that now you're going to have to deal with. And so generally for it, but something you have to keep an eye on.
Okay, thank you. Shelley?
Yes, sir. So somewhat along the lines of housing, how do you propose to address the city's affordable housing costs?
Yeah,
Crisis, excuse me. How do you propose to address the city's affordable housing crisis?
Right. Luckily or unluckily, it's not a problem that's exclusive to Colorado Springs. It's kind of a nationwide problem that we've seen, and it's really twofold. I do think the city and the county can do things to incentivize builders to make, more affordable housing, lower income housing, because the math has to work either way if you're a developer, right? And so you have to work on that aspect of it. The second piece of that, which I think is more almost of a macroeconomic thing, is we've just seen runaway inflation. And, a lot of that's due to the pandemic, a lot of that's due to stimulus money or whatever reasons you think. But, when lumber when a 2x4 went up to $10, that's problematic, right? Thankfully, it's coming back down, but we have to get inflation under control. I think increasing the interest rates will cool off housing quite a bit. It's already shown that effect, and I think the best way to achieve, affordable housing and not runaway housing prices, is to be very, and this is at the federal level, be very judicious about moving interest rates, and I really think that's the primary driver.
Okay. Public safety. Police department is short 70-ish officers from its authorized strength. How would you address public safety needs?
Yeah, public safety is incredibly important. And, as we, oddly enough, just again, growing up here, seeing it go from what I call a town into a city with kind of big city problems now, property theft, crime, stolen cars, all this stuff that we really didn't see a ton of, 10, 15, 20 years ago. The latest budgets did ask for an increase in, law enforcement officers, and I'm definitely supportive of that. And so, I think, I think there's that aspect of it, having more patrolling and more police on the streets is good generally. But I also think there are other things that we could do. And I went to a great Crime Stoppers forum last night where the chief of police spoke, the sheriff, our district attorney, and a couple of great experts on crime in general. And, we think about the number of assaults in the city, right? And it's gone up. Well, our population's gone up, so you would think that would go hand in hand. But a number of these assaults are where a potential crime, like somebody's taking something out of the back of your truck or out of your house, for example, the criminal and the victim are meeting at that incident, and then it turns into an assault, right? And so I don't know the exact term for it, but in my head, it's kind of follow-on crime. And so I think that's something that we've got to continue to address. We've got to continue to expand homeless outreach, and then cleaning up the camps and getting the needles out of there, I think, is great work. This fentanyl problem is a huge issue, and it's leading to a lot of this additional crime that we're seeing, and so that's something we need to focus on as well.
So I guess as a candidate, sir, the League of Women Voters has a Vote 411 portal where you will be getting a list of questions that are pretty basic questions for us, which is why we don't jump into those, what are your top 3 priorities? What experience do you have? Because no offense, those should be on your website, and those should be kind of in that Vote 411 portal that we use as the League of Voters across the country. So our questions are pretty specific to each of you that are not those generic kind of basic questions that everybody asks of you as a candidate. You're homeless. You just mentioned the homeless, expand homeless outreach and get the needles out. We've got a lot of mentally ill people that are homeless. And it has nothing to do with drugs. at all, but whether it's their status as PTSD veterans or whether or not they should really be in a mental home and their families cannot take care of them for whatever reason, that, it's not just an easy kind of fix, destroying camps or moving them from one place to another. So my question to you as a candidate is, how do you have any kind of ideas or a plan on how to address our homeless issues and not just about the drugs that are in the camps, please?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Homelessness is a multifaceted issue, right? You've got folks that have had an emergency, the death of a spouse, the loss of a job, some kind of tragedy that has made them homeless. And then you've got addiction issues and mental health issues as well. That requires a completely different approach and solution to the first one that I just mentioned. And so, yes, sadly in this country, our healthcare system is not set up and funded to handle this stuff at scale. And I think that is kind of an overarching problem that we have to work against, so to speak. But if you want to go into the details, I think a lot of the public-private partnerships that we've had recently, the Rescue Mission and Greccio and folks like that are providing great resources to tackle this stuff alongside of the city resources. I think that model has shown some progress, and I would love to double down on that, honestly, and take it even further and see how else we can be effective. Getting people treatment, but then also getting them healthy and confident and on the job, or not on the job, but job training and education and stuff like that is important. And then they've got to go on to that next step to where they can kind of reintroduce themselves into society, if you will, and not simply, here's a bed, here's a couple of nights, you're probably, then you're kind of forced right back out onto the street, and then it's rinse and repeat. And so it's a hard, complicated process. And so I think we've got to double down on some of our current efforts that are working, and obviously look to other cities and see what they're doing and see if there's things that we're missing or bad assumptions that we're making as well.
Thank you.
Glenn, do you foresee asking voters for any additional taxes or fees? And if so, for what purpose?
Not currently. There's nothing that stands out to me in terms of additional taxes. We passed PPRTA this last year. That's great. That's been a godsend for infrastructure, roads. We've got stormwater that addresses some of that. On the April ballot will be the TOPS initiative. It is incredibly important that we get that passed. It doesn't increase the tax, the sales tax that goes towards our parks, but we've got city parks budget, county parks budget, and then we've got TOPS, which attempts to fill some of that gap. But I think we're still underserved in that area, and it's something that I'll continue to focus on and support. It's likely the number one reason that people love to be in Colorado Springs anyways, is access to our great outdoors. So I'll always focus on that. But back to your original question, additional taxes, no, I don't see anything that's front of mind for me.
Okay. Thank you. Shelley?
A couple things that are very much issues for the League of Women Voters. We've been talking about this one in particular for quite a long time, is city council pay. City council pay is, I guess the only word for it with my autism is it's awful. The amount of work that is required is, it doesn't compensate, you're not compensated enough for with regards to what we expect you to do as city council members. How do you feel about increasing city council pay? And I guess the people who are against it, if you are one of those against it, why are you against it? And if you're not, or are in support of it, how do we accomplish getting city council paid better? Because really, it's really only for retired people who can afford it. No offense, but it's not inclusive to all.
Yep. No, you bring up a good point. For me, there's really kind of two points to this. City council is something that I've been interested in. It's complex, interesting, valuable work. And so I have kind of worked towards the opportunity to run for city council and, take on that additional workload in addition to operating our business and be able to survive. Not everybody can do that, right? Most people can't afford $6,250 per year. Won't even pay for the gas to go to all the meetings, and that's the truth. City council pay, to have a city council person make decisions on developments that are hundreds of millions of dollars, that's pretty important work. That's critical work, and so the $6,250, I'm not doing it for the money. I know that. I do want to see it bumped up. That being said, I don't want to see it bumped up to where it's this big obnoxious number that now people are all of a sudden interested in city council because the pay is nice and it's a great stepping stone for my political career and I can do things with that pay. So I do want to see it bumped up. What is that number? I don't know. A third or a fourth of the mayor's pay has been floated around, and I think what is that? The mayor's pay is around $120 if I remember right. And so, if city council pay was $30K a year, I think that at least helps pay for some of the gas and some of your time and effort to go to a lot of these meetings and do a lot of this work, while still making sure that if somebody wants to be on city council, their motives for doing so are still true. Long answer to a short question.
Okay. Colorado Springs residents have discussed for some time detailed emergency evacuation planning. This was particularly acute on the west side for obvious reasons as it relates to wildfire. So is this something that you would consider addressing as a council person?
Yeah, absolutely. I live on the west side, so I live in a wildland urban interface, or you may hear it called WUI.
The WUI.
The WUI, yep. And as the entire west side of our city is in a WUI, right? And so this is important. Evacuation concerns that wasn't something we were ever worried about when I was a little kid. It just wasn't really a thought. But our forest has dried out, and so wildfires are a threat. And so as we saw, and I live in Mountain Shadows too, and so it hits close to home. I can tell you all of my neighbors are concerned about things like that. And so I do think we need to take a long, hard look at things like evacuation times, they have put resources into place to do some, forest clearing and things like that, and the fire department's doing great work in that area. And so, yeah, I do think we need to study it. There's a number of folks out there, mainly I think from the educational area, that have studied it, and they have put models in place. And we should be looking at that and understanding, is this accurate? Is the data good? Does it work? Has it been is it tried and true anywhere? And so, yeah, I think that's important.
Okay. As I pass off to Shelley, it looks like we're just about wrapping up here. So I think if Shelley asks one more question, we'll give you a couple minutes to give us your final thoughts, and that'll be it. So go ahead, Shelley.
Yes, sir. So another league question specific to the league. I'm not sure if you were aware of the Harvard Law Election Clinic lawsuit, specifically drawn up to change our municipal elections from the spring to the fall in hopes of obviously increasing voter turnout based on the data. How do you feel about that lawsuit?
So I do know of the lawsuit. I don't know a lot of the intimate details of the lawsuit. I think you could make arguments for and against that. Yes, you'll get a higher voter turnout. Will you get higher involvement and knowledge of local issues, or will they get drowned out? And yes, their turnout's greater, but the elections aren't. What's the word I'm looking for?
Maybe the voters aren't as informed about.
Yeah. Maybe the voters are just not informed because they're caught up in our national politics. Which, let's be honest, in November when they spend hundreds of millions of dollars to clog up your to clog up your mailbox and clog up your airwaves, I don't see how somebody that wants to do important work on city council can compete with that. Mm-hmm. And so, again, I believe local politics, our county commissioners, the mayor, city council members, et cetera, have an immediate effect on the people in our region, mm-hmm. right? And you can see that every day. And so that's important. It should be focused on. I don't want that to get drowned out by moving it to November. And so is it cost prohibitive to do it in an off cycle in April for the city? Yes. Do we get some lower voter turnout? Yes. But I think there's value to also having a little bit of focus. These are local issues, mm-hmm. and the people that are voting and tuning in hopefully have focused on them at that time. It just goes back to local, right? Those are local positions. They need local focus. They need their own attention.
All right. Glenn, do you want to give us 2 minutes of a wrap up here? Why should voters vote for you? And is there anything we didn't touch on that you'd like to address?
Yeah, so I appreciate this time. I'm looking forward to the campaign process. A lot of people have asked why in the world would you go take on an additional 40 hours for $6,000 a year and go through the campaign process and knocking on doors and but it sounds cliche, but this is home. I'll probably never leave Colorado Springs, even if the thought sounds tempting at times. And so I like complex work. I like being involved. And so, I'm really focused on it from that standpoint. I love our natural habitat. And so I really want to focus on making sure that our parks, trails, and open spaces are not only preserved, but expanded. And so we can do a better job in that. Every person running for office talks about the economy, and yes, it's a no-brainer, right? We want a thriving city that has opportunity for everybody. But I do think we've seen examples of where when the economy gets too hot, things get a little out of control. And then all of a sudden a carton of eggs is $10 and you get your property tax bill because your house is worth more on paper, and then all of a sudden you really get squeezed. And so, I think economic issues are super important to me. I'm an economics major, and so I have background in that, small business as well. So I appreciate your support. I ran last year, and I think I had a lot of supporters, and I'm looking forward to kind of building on that and really focusing on making a difference in the Springs. All right.
Well, thank you, Glenn. I appreciate you being here. You've been watching or listening to a joint podcast effort by Sixty35 Media and the League of Women Voters of the Pikes Peak Region.
Be sure to follow Making Democracy Work and check out wvppr.org for more information regarding our candidate forums in March.
Or check out Sixty35 Vote to make sure your vote is an informed one. This podcast is produced by Dave Gardner. Video is directed by Nick Raven. I'm Brian Grossman, Executive Editor.
And I'm Shelley Rohr, spokesperson for the League of Women Voters.
We'll see you next time.
Hi, I'm Dave Gardner.
And I'm Nick Raven.
We're the podcast producers here at Sixty35 Media.
Sixty35 Vote is just one of a growing family of hyperlocal podcasts that we're creating.
And these are for you, someone who wants to engage fully in your community.
We've got the 6035, which is a quick, lively recap of the top news stories of the week.
It's my favorite. It's really great and often funny.
I love having you as a guest, actually.
I do too.
And then we have Hot Takes and Streaming Breaks, which is a potpourri of news and commentary about movies, gaming, TV, streaming, and just so much more. It's for the youthful at heart, and that could be anyone, really.
Yeah, I'm surprised I even really enjoy it because Nick hosts that, and he's witty.
Well, and the cool thing is that you can watch both of these podcasts on YouTube.
Or you can listen to them on the go in your favorite podcast app.
And there's a couple more, but you can also visit 6035media.org/podcast to see them, browse them, sample them.
And then subscribe to the ones that you like.
And then subscribe to this YouTube channel.
Yeah. And if you really love it all, like we do, you can just subscribe to the 6035 Podcast Network podcast, which is a conglomeration of all the episodes, all the brilliance and humor that emanates from the studio.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of it. So like and subscribe today and go listen to them all or watch them.
What he said. Good. Thanks.
Got it?
That wasn't so painful.